Hello, Internet. This is once again Kopitam Council, new week, new episodes, and we had to respond to over the weekend. There was a so-called gathering, uh, or a rally, if you might want to, be PC about it. It's an anti-graft rally in front of a local mall in KL. Adi. What do you heard about the event on the weekend?
Well, aside from what the news have been telling us, that there was a gathering of student activists and other kinds of organizations outside, I guess it was Sogo, right? Sogo Mall in
Correct.
Kuala Lumpur. They were protesting against voicing out their indignation against corrupt practices such as bribery, or lamenting over how a lot of the institutions that are meant to keep our government accountable aren't exactly strengthened, or they're in the right place to actually perform the tasks and functions that they were set up to do. So this just came off the heels of, I think that you can say this came off the heels of what happened on the end of December last year over here in Sabah, when just people also organized outside Menara Kinabalu, which for you people of not from Sabah doesn't know, it's the central administrative building for the Sabah state government, saying that they also, voicing out similar concerns as well, that they do not want to see all these practices of bribery, of corruption be normalized or even be tolerated, especially with a government that has espoused ideas of reform, which our Prime Minister has vowed to implement during his campaign. During his campaign season before he became prime minister. So this is circled around because back then, when he was in the opposition, this was the clarion call. This was his bread and butter, to take to the stands, to fight against all these practices, corruption, normative practices of bad governance. And now he has to be the one to go through this. He has to be the one to observe as for the top position of Malaysia's leader here. So, in a twist of irony, he has to be the one to witness that. Okay, well, we rallied against Bosku. Now people are rallying against the practice of this government. No, maybe not particularly against the prime minister himself. I'm sure a lot of people still have a lot of faith in the prime minister and the reform agendas and ideas that he practices and espouses. But we have to admit that that hasn't really fully materialized in the past 2 years. What do you think of this?
Before I go to what I say, what I think, do you think, at least on paper, academically speaking, do you think it's fair to compare their manifesto, PH manifesto, versus unity government now? Do you think it's fair?
I think, well, the manifesto was made to win the votes, right? But that's optics. That is something that you can promise. But once you are in the administration, things are completely different. So I think you have to judge it based on what they are on their own terms. The manifesto on its own terms, and the administration as it is on its own terms. Whether or not the current administration is able to maneuver and implement the things that it needs to do, of course, there are bureaucratic hurdles that need to be overcome.
All right. So yeah, I mean, I love street protests. When Besi in Sabah last time, Besi One, Besi 2.0, whatever, I always join and always come up with very creative placard, whatever that I think at the time. Those was the younger years. More importantly, Adi, those people actually championing street protests were actually in the government today, including Prime Minister himself. So this is supposed to be something that they should not encourage, but should have a proper guidelines for it. So there would not be any more kind of news that saying, oh, police will cancel their gatherings on because of technicalities, whatnot. So because in principle, they should be agree to any street protest. So that's one. Number two is the content itself. This, like you mentioned, the university students, mostly university students, but they open to anyone to join, even politicians as well. It's just as long as you don't bring your party flags or whatnot, to identify your party to hijack the protest. You are welcome. So we can see some politicians as well from Amana as well were in the protest. But more important that I want to highlight is the demand of this so-called protest. So there are three demands. Number one is the demand for the Attorney General chambers to be separated from the executive, from PMO. So basically, there's no need for the Attorney General to be under the purview of the executive. Should be moved to Parliament. Should be moved to Parliament, where it's transparency can be guaranteed. So that's number one. I think it's a good thing. I think everyone, even you in a position, can be in support of this. Secondly, is they want MSCC to be free as well, and it's not just for them to investigate, but also to do beyond that. So I don't know what form they would like to be in terms of beyond that, but I think would be to actually implement the laws, not just involving the police, but on their own to do the charging and whatnot. And the third one, Adi, is they want the Political Funding Act to be expedited. There's already, I think, talks in Parliament to do this, but somehow they don't satisfy with the pace of it. So what they want is to be expedited, just like the Attorney General Chamber to be separated, so that these two are reform that being like you mentioned, included in the manifesto and needs to be seen now by the rakyat. It's already half of his term. Unity government is turning to is 3 years old already, and they cannot wait for this anymore. Whatever economic reform that already being done, it's good, but whatnot. But I also agree with these university students that demanding all these three things. What do you think about these three things?
I think these things are definitely should be implemented, especially when I'm going to be focusing on the first, which is the separation of the AG chambers from the executive, right, from the PMO's office, Prime Minister's office, because that was what we technically had, I sort of had before when it comes to judicial independence. 20, 30 years ago, back then, the judiciary was not so beholden to the executive, not beholden to the central government. And that was neutered by Tun M. And that was always been we've been operating under those consequences for the past 20, 30 years. And that is resulted in a lot of the stepping over a lot of the legalisms that we have in place to ensure that no one can get away with corrupt practices, right? And so we are reinstating back a practice, an idea that was already there beforehand. This is basically cleaning up the mess that Mahathir had created during his first time as Prime Minister, because for him at the time, the judiciary and other institutions such as the monarch, he saw as things that were curbing his attempts to consolidate power. So he had to centralize everything under his control to make sure that his ideas and visions were carried out without interference. So his people can also carry out his visions and ideas without interference from, let's say, MECC or the courts, essentially. So that is one thing that is very important, because these institutions are important, ensuring that a government is held to their own standards and practices that it has set out, the laws that it has set out by itself. It is not just one thing for a country to have just a state, the state, which is the country itself, and the government, the government itself that runs all the public infrastructure and utilities and the day-to-day operations of the country. But it also needs to have its own safeguards. It needs to have its own measures to make sure that power does not get centralized to a particular point where it becomes authoritarian. That is the point where we have institutions such as the courts here, right? And thirdly, is that I just want to make another point here, is that accountability is also the law. The law is meant to be as an expression of the citizens to hold their leaders responsible and to ensure that the state remains answerable to who? To the people that it governs, to the people that voted in for the leaders here. There has to be this. That's why we have the three branches of governance. We have the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. These are all meant to supplement the demands and needs of the people, so that the leaders are able to carry them out in a way that's needed. So that is the ideal form. Ideally, that is what every state should aspire to be. Malaysia is not an exception to it. So that's why when I see that young people are protesting for things such as this, when it comes to the essential qualities for a strong state, doesn't mean whatever, but a state that is meant to serve the people, I don't see why detractors are saying that this is, throwing out insults such as, oh, these young people don't know what they're talking about, or good luck finding a job in the future, because these are things that ensure that the state is able to operate efficiently without any means of sabotaging or undermining the economic prosperity of the country, and so that people across the entire country are able to benefit and prosper together, right? So I don't see, I don't, I think I have to say that it's good on these young people to take the initiative to do so, because this isn't the protest of like saying, like how it was in Bursi. I think when you were there, it's all about, take down this government, take down the BN government, take down Najib. This is less tangible and is more encompassing. It dives into the meat and bones of what is a deep, how to say, a fundamental problem in Malaysia. So there is I would say that there's a noble sense of objective to what they are saying, and to be able to provide three solutions, three recommendations to the government. That, I mean, is based on the manifesto, but still, to be able to navigate and say that, okay, how do we separate the judiciary to become more independent, to become more accountable, and so it can hold leaders more accountable? That's fantastic, right? In a way, it's also common sense, but it's like something that's so lacking these days. Is that, okay, we have to make sure the judiciary is independent. We have to make sure the Anti-Corruption Commission is independent. It's a no-brainer. And for them, and the fact that we have young people come out to say the obvious, to state the obvious. I mean, of course, maybe everyone else has the same idea, right? But of course, it's been quiet, and it has and young people to amass in these numbers. It shows that where are our priorities being held right now?
I mean, I easily agree with you because Adi, because for youth, especially for university students, this is the only avenue that they have to express whatever they think the right is for the country. So maybe if you're a bit older, young adults, you probably already belong to a certain company or belong to a certain party or belong to a certain NGO because you have that luxury in life. These people like still attending lectures, so all they have is just their weekends. Maybe they're probably going to outing and might as well do some protest for 4 hours and then go back to their dorm. So that's I think practically what is happening here, because most people I can see in the comment below, if you're gonna see a lot of comments in this video, is hey, this is a waste of time. Youth should be like working on their self improvement kind of stuff, be a better student, be a better whatever. This is part of it. This is the part of a civic initiative to make sure the awareness people that these three things is need to be demanded and demanded very very soon. So I don't see why certain people hating on this because of this is a street protest, because this is led by very young people, university students. So basically, they just want to rubbish all this the whole idea or the whole campaign just because this is mooted by some university students. So that arrogance from certain people or even certain politicians is very very uncalled for. Another thing that I would like to just go a little bit of tangent here, Adi. It seems to be like in an episode of Anwar's dealing with things that actually in line with what he said, but not the action. Action means unity government actions. So this is one example. There's an attempt to stop this protest and whatnot, but we know PM was I think responded 24 hours before the protest. He said, "Go ahead. I have no problem with this. I'm in line with what they wanted to demand or whatnot." So he has no problem with it. So as a prime minister, maybe on personal capacity, he's agree with it. But of course, there's no such thing as personal capacity as a prime minister. If prime minister says okay, means police would allow it, whatnot. The thing is, I think when it comes to managing all this, it's the subordinates, it's the ministers that maybe Saifuddin Nasution or Rafizi Ramli or Fahmi Fazil would not up to their game, so to speak. Saifuddin, I think the other day, was very uncomfortable answering in the press conference, to ask about this. And then some ministers would, ping pong this to, oh, you should ask the right minister or whatnot. And then, of course, the journalist gonna ask Prime Minister himself. So you see, like, they should handle this because Anwar is all over the place. He's all over the world. Because his focus is economy, because he believes economy is the pillar to this country's advancement. You cannot have a luxury to protest if you are hungry. Means economy, the ability for the rakyat to put food on the table must be protected. So that's what he's doing as a father of the nation. So these ministers need to pick up some slacks and come on, guys. I'm not even I don't want to sound like a PH fanboy here, but I mean it's straightforward and just do your job, do much better job, because Anwar has to handle something else, and you in Malaysia should do much better job.
Yeah, I definitely agree with this whole tangent, because going back to the idea of the state needing to be strong, but to also be impersonal here, when we put too much currency and value to the prime minister himself, it's almost making us seem that this whole government is all dictated and held together by the personality of Anwar Ibrahim, which is the opposite of what you understand. The state and Anwar Ibrahim is somehow married together with one another, these two notions here. And that was the situation we saw ourselves with Mahathir back during his first tenure, right? You cannot separate the state from Mahathir, but the whole point is that it needs to be impersonal, right? And that is why I agree when he says the other bureaucrats, the other leaders, right, needs to pick up the slack as well to support the unity government, not support Anwar Ibrahim, support the unity government. It needs to be highly impersonal so that the state does not, so that they don't have these lack of interest fighting one another to secure themselves domination over the other, to have all these rent seekers vying for who gets the bigger share here. When it's impersonal, when it's dedicated to something higher, which is the state itself, then you can see the the evolution of the change of, okay, then it needs to be, fighting for a higher purpose, which our leaders have failed to do, that's why we have all these political infighting and contradictions with one another. There's the over reliance on what the prime minister wants, but like it seems that except for there's a few exceptions. One of it is one of the deputy prime minister, not the one with a DN and AA, by the way, that's able to make decisions on their own on their own initiative, without having to rely so much on the prime minister to make a call or whatever, to say that, oh, you need to do this, you need to do that. So that is very important, that the state needs to be impersonal. The personality politics, which I think is being indirectly created here with how things are set up, needs to also be tackled. There needs to be bifurcation between the leader and the state itself. Now, I'm just going to go back again to all these young people who have the courage to say these things, right? To fight for democratic transparency, because I think it's come to a point where Malaysians, we do have this idea that we have accepted this idea of a democratic form of governance, right? We all agreed that, I think this is the best way to have our country select its own leaders, which is the democratic way. Okay, now you can say that we have a lot of things to do to make sure we've embraced fully democratic principles. That's a conversation for entirety. But the fact that young people are pushing for more of that, it's the step in the right direction that we are all hoping to see. To see that the democratic process is fair, transparent, so that the best leaders are the ones. I mean, we vote for the leader. We present it with leaders who are of the best quality, the ones that we can vet, the ones that we can decide as, okay, this is someone that stands for something more than just personal gain. Let's vote for that person, right? And these kinds of reforms that they propose, the ones that have reintroduced back from the manifesto, are ways to do so, are ways to make sure this whole idea of personality, the idea of money politics and patronage is removed from the equation slowly. I wouldn't say it would completely eradicate, because cultural mindset will take a long time to shift to accepting non-patronage style politics, but it will set the foundation to move from that, to evolve more from that, to grow from that. And for young people to see this, I mean, you can say that young people have been seeing this for a long time. Like 10 years ago, young people have been arguing for this with the Bersih rallies, right? 20 years ago, young people back then were also doing the same thing. Even the prime minister himself was once a student activist, and some people in his cabinet were also once student activists fighting for the same thing, right? So it's going. I mean, this is not going to be the first time. It's not the first time this happened. It's not going to be the last time that's happened. As long as there are people who want to champion for these things, there will always be these kinds of protests. And the fact that there's a protest doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a bad thing. People think protest is going to be something like, oh, we're going to burn down the city, we're going to trash the entire place, we're going to ruin. That's not the case. I think Malaysians have proven to be very responsible in protesting for fair and equitable governance here, right? So, I mean, this is not May 13th, right? This is far from it, right? So this is just fighting for what is right when we decided to form the country, a country that is meant to be pluralistic, that is meant to be free from corruption, that we have prominent, good leaders to lead us into the future. And I don't think that is something to be derided or chided at. And you can say, if we say that, oh, this is a tactic for, for Anwar and all that, but it is. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to separate it from the person himself. Like, if you want to make an association, right? It's the message that is important. And I hope people would see that all these brave young people is not wasting their time to go and protest. It is them championing a cause that we have, everyone, I believe, in Malaysia has a stake in.
For those who thinks that street protest is a bad thing, a necessary bad thing, just think that street protest is sort of a good sign that the youth still care and the youth still have the courage to say what is right, to make what is right. I think that's it, Eddie, for this episode. For those who are listening to this and thinking like, hey, they should talk about this, they should talk about another thing, then please comment down below what we should talk about next topic, because we have a lot of things to cover. But of course, due to YouTube algorithm, we try to select our battles. Yeah, because it's impossible for us to do a video of every single issues out there, especially because we're covering worldwide issues as far as Russia, as far as US as well. So please, it would help us very, very much if you, as a listeners to us, subscribers to us, and put down what would you like us to discuss. Any last word from you, Adi?
Yeah, I mean, suggestions are always great, because sometimes it's mostly me and Hafiz like thinking, what can we talk about this time? So, okay, we'll pick whatever is hot at the time. Maybe we'll have things that like interest us that's completely different from our usual topics here. So it's always nice to see what people would like to hear from us, or things that we can improve on, to ensure that the discussion is more productive and worth your time.
And if you haven't know already, you can listen to us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, also on short form format on TikTok and Instagram. So with that, goodbye for now.